Slide 1. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Bernard Lu Xian Lung, and my presentation is entitled, Tourism and Simulacrum, the Computational Economy of Algorithmic Destinations. At the core of this presentation is the notion of tourism computability, the use of algorithmic destinations as archetypes, and the reflexive ties between tourism destinations and its simulacrum. So while much of my talk is about the methodological utility of simulations in tourism research, it has epistemological and ontological relevance to the treatment of destinations as simulacrum. Slide 2. The presentation progresses in 3 stages. Firstly, I explore the gamification of tourism by a consideration of 2 related processes, virtualization and realization. Secondly, Gamified tourism is framed within the theory of computation, evolutionary game theory and behavioral economics. This approach is taken to facilitate our consideration of the computational economy of algorithmic destinations. Thirdly, I extrapolate possible strategies for destination resilience and authenticity that follows from gamification and a rule-based understanding of tourist behavior. Slide 3. While animals have been known to play games, games are largely a human artifact. A product of human ingenuity, that has of late, taken on a life of its own. Games function both as a virtualization, and a realization of life. The virtualization function of games target the cognitive aspects of experiences and results in games being treated as life. Let's call it the as claim. We observe this in the realm of tourism where replicas of Venice are found dispersed across the globe. These simulacrum are meant to conjure up images of the real Venice. The realization function of games addresses the behavioral dimension of experiences. It is common to hear people making statements such as, "Golf is my life." Let's call this the as claim. There are clear instances of this in tourism, where one would agree that gondoliers are employed in a very real economic activity, when they row gondolas. This is true regardless of which Venice they ply their trade in. The gamification of tourism and destinations is therefore both a virtualization and a realization. Gamification transcends the noun and stresses the verb. In this sense, gamified destinations are simulacrum thriving in an economic ecology of their own. And much like developments in warfare simulation and realization, the virtualization and realization components of gamification are part of a reflexive cycle. The simulacrum feeds off the real. This would suggest to us 2 strategic and complementary routes to destination resilience. One that targets the simulacrum at the cognitive level through faithful representations of the real. And the other that incentivizes behavior through effective information signaling, which is central to cybernetics and biofeedback initiatives. Destinations become resilient and experiences are authenticated when they are embedded within the right network of feedbacks. Information signaling within the network drives the adaptive mechanism that undergirds the destination's resilience. A recent expression of this is found in applications of augmented reality to tourism promotion and experience design. Slide 4. Consistent with the cognitive behavioral dichotomy introduced earlier, I propose a conceptualization that bridges the 2 dimensions, that is cognitive behavioral, through discussions of heuristics and patterns of interactions. This rule-centric framework is rooted in the theory of computation, evolutionary game theory and behavioral economics. While these domains often stress individual games that are treated as subsets of larger social phenomenon, I take a slightly more ambitious view, in that I consider how games are life itself, albeit within the context of tourism. The emphasis is therefore on the world creation properties of games, which is not limited to either strategy formulation or pure empirics. The conceptual model of a game may be summarized according to 4 essential features. The game environment can be real or virtual. It delineates the zone of jurisdiction for rules. In this sense, it provides a frame for gamified behavior. Hence, at the point where the frame is permeated, the reflexive cycle between reality and the game begins. This paves the way for the game environment to invade reality by assuming the role of a medium or substrate on which life thrives. Where, for example, in the media lexicon, one hears of how the medium is the massage or the information. for instance game telemetry, far from merely serving diagnostical purposes or being a weary frame of the game, may harnessed as a feedback loop to diversity and evolve the game to a hitherto unknown level. In a similar fashion, travel commentaries and travel blogs are not just part of the parallel narrative in the travel experience, suppose we treat them as simulacrum, but they take on a life of their own by engendering socially constructed virtual destinations for their readers. A case in point is the many social media platforms that have arisen to augment and enrich travel experiences. Players in a game are actors and agents affected by game rules. They are engaged with the game at a personal level or play the game by proxy, for example as when visitor destination dynamics are affected by policy levers put in place by planners. In a sense, to play and be played. In which case the complexity of the game may increase exponentially. Sometimes this is to the detriment of the game, as when a game ceases to be won and degenerates into hooliganism. Because of this, it is conventional for the interaction between players to be governed by rules that instill a degree of behavioral continuity, thereby sustaining the gameplay enough to give it meaning. Game rules describe the behavioral space afforded to agents given a set of salient incentives. Since rules embody information, they are fundamental to both the cognitive level, think heuristics, and the behavioral level, think routines and practices. They are scalable from the micro level of heuristics and routines right up to the meso level of sockets, rules to govern other rules, and eventually pattern the macro structure, think spatial assemblages. Keeping score of the game entails the establishment of an evaluative criteria. Because an adaptive mechanism is implied with the use of heuristics and meta rules, rules that operate on other rules, the game progresses towards a moving target in much the same way as an economy's movement in a dynamic equilibrium. A good way to score this dynamic equilibrium is to track resilience, where resilience is an emergent property of interactions between agents in space and time. A drill down to the level of agent-to-agent interactions reveals how destination resilience at the macro level is a function of the cumulative nudges that have taken place over the course of the game. This represents changes at the meso level where each nudge is an innovation in rules and behavior motivated by dynamic incentivizations and a need to establish behavioral continuity in the light of dynamic changes. Eventually such dynamic alignment affects a change on the scoring of the game itself, that is destination resilience. At the micro level, each nudge is motivated by an affordance of a lab to agents. The affordance being a kind of information signaling enabled by feedbacks between the behavior of individual agents and incentives afforded to each agents. Slide 5. The gamified paradigm is central to our computational economic analysis of destination resilience and paves the way for an operational model that is in effect an algorithmic destination. This amounts to tourism computability. A tourism computability that considers the computational economy of destinations through an application of generative rules and analysis of emergent rule sets. The application of generative rules is an additive approach in the sense that basic rules are operated recursively, resulting in spatial patterns that unfold over time. Such a generative approach is tourism psychology taken to its nth degree. And because recursive methods are used, the rules scale from the micro, through the meso and onwards to the macro level. The emergent algorithmic destination are petri dishes on which further economic analyses can be conducted. An analysis of emergent rule sets is conducted through a subtractive exercise. Where a reductionist approach motivated by economic considerations, for example stylized facts in the core model of economic geography, is applied on the spatial patterns generated through the additive approach. Techniques suggested by mathematical morphology, for example dilation or erosion, generation of Voronoi diagrams, may be used to subtract redundant details and abstract from the algorithmic destinations. This has characterized the approach taken in urban morphology, especially with the recent advancement in GIS technologies. The only difference is that these morphological analysis is often done on remotely sensed images of locales rather than pure algorithmic destinations. The dual approach involving additive and subtractive operations form the comparative static toolset for the economic analysis of resilience at algorithmic destinations. Slide 6. Resilience is a coin composed of two sides: authenticity and fakery. The road to destination resilience navigates the thin fine line that delineates the two. Discussions about destination resilience are inextricable from the dialectics that surround emergent authenticity and complex tourism systems. Future tourism strategies will have to explicitly recognize this reconceptualization of tourism and take adaptive steps towards the facilitation of emergent authenticity.